Most of you have been told that if you want to build muscle, recover faster, or stave off age-related decline, you need to buy a giant plastic tub of whey protein powder. The fitness industry has drilled this into your head. But here's the problem. Whey protein isn't the magic bullet it's marketed to be. In fact, focusing solely on protein shakes might distract us from the real solution to muscle health. The truth is, there's a food you've overlooked. It's not trendy, it doesn't come in flashy packaging, but it builds muscle better than whey protein. And it helps prevent one of the most devastating conditions of aging, sarcopenia, the progressive loss of muscle mass. Today, I'm going to show you what this food is, how it works, and why it outperforms that powdered scoop you've been sold. Let's get something straight right out of the gate. Whey protein has been marketed to you as if it were the holy grail of muscle health. Walk into any gym and you'll see people clutching giant shaker bottles like their lives depend on them. Stroll down the aisles of a supplement shop and you'll be bombarded with images of ripped torsos promising you the same results. If only you'd buy a $60 tub of powder. It's seductive marketing. And like most seductive marketing, it hides the truth. The narrative goes like this. You need protein to build muscle. Whey is fast absorbing, and therefore, it's superior. Add in a couple of randomized controlled trials showing that whey stimulates muscle protein synthesis after a workout, and boom, you've got $1 billion industry. But here's the catch. Building muscle is not just about triggering synthesis in the short term, it's about sustaining muscle health in the long run. And when we look past the flashy claims and focus on actual outcomes, whey protein falls short.
Why?
First, let's talk about context. The body doesn't function in isolated pathways. It's not a simple input-output machine where you add whey and you get biceps. Muscle growth and maintenance depend on a complex interplay of amino acids, hormones, inflammation levels, mitochondrial health, and yes, lifestyle factors like exercise and sleep. Whey protein only feeds one sliver of that system. It gives you a bolus of amino acids, particularly leucine, which does spike muscle protein synthesis, but it does little to address the other drivers of muscle health. Think of it like revving the engine without putting gas in the tank. Sure, you hear the roar, but you're not going anywhere. Second, let's address the elephant in the room, overconsumption. Most people in industrialized nations already get enough protein in their diets. The average American consumes around 90-100 grams per day, when the requirement for maintaining nitrogen balance in most adults is much lower, closer to 50-60 grams. So unless you're severely deficient, that extra scoop of whey isn't filling a gap. It's just padding numbers that were already sufficient. And more doesn't always mean better. Excess protein, especially from isolated sources, can stress the kidneys, raise insulin like growth factor 1, IGF-1, and may even accelerate aging pathways. In other words, you're not hacking your health, you might be straining it. Third, let's not ignore the processing problem. Whey protein is a byproduct of cheese production. It doesn't arrive in your shaker naturally, it's processed, filtered, flavored, and often sweetened with sugar alcohols or artificial additives. Does that sound like a whole food? Not even close. And here's where the bigger picture comes in. Muscle health is deeply tied to metabolic health. You cannot separate the two. Sarcopenia, the age-related loss of muscle mass, is not just about muscles wasting away. It's about the body's declining ability to use energy efficiently, manage inflammation, and repair tissue. Whole foods bring more than protein to the table. They bring micronutrients, phytonutrients, fibers, and fats that regulate metabolism at every level. Whey, stripped of these companions, is like sending in a soldier without an army. Fourth, we must look at long-term outcomes, not just short-term studies. Yes, whey protein increases muscle protein synthesis immediately after ingestion. That much is true. But does it prevent sarcopenia better than a diet rich in real, nutrient-dense food? The evidence says no. In older adults, sustained improvements in muscle mass and function are consistently linked to diets that emphasize whole protein sources, fish, eggs, dairy, legumes, not just supplements. Why? Because sarcopenia is a chronic process driven by inflammation, oxidative stress, mitochondrial decline, and hormonal changes. Whey doesn't fix those. Omega-3 fatty acids do, antioxidants do, vitamins and minerals do. Try finding those in a scoop of vanilla-flavored isolate. Finally, let's talk psychology and behavior. Relying on whey protein reinforces the myth that health comes from powders and pills, rather than from real food and real choices. It keeps people trapped in a transactional mindset. If I just buy this, I'll be healthy. That's not empowerment. That's dependency, and worse, it displaces whole foods. If someone fills up on a 200 calorie shake, that's 200 calories they didn't get from salmon, or beans, or eggs, or leafy greens. Over time, that trade-off matters. The body doesn't just want protein, it wants nourishment. So, is whey protein useless? Not entirely. If you're an athlete training at high intensity, recovering from illness, or struggling to meet basic protein needs due to appetite loss, whey can be a convenient tool. But here's the key. It's just a tool, not a cure, not a panacea, and certainly not the answer to sarcopenia. When it comes to preventing muscle loss and promoting longevity, no supplement can outcompete the synergy of real food. And this is where the industry misleads you. They sell you a product by narrowing the lens. They show you the spike in synthesis, the ripped model, the before and after picture. They don't show you the long-term story, frailty and old age, metabolic dysfunction, and the subtle deficits caused by ignoring whole nutrition. That's the story that matters. That's the story you deserve to hear. So the next time you reach for that shiny tub of whey, ask yourself, am I chasing a quick fix, or am I building a foundation for lasting health? Because powders may promise muscles today, but only whole foods protect your body for a lifetime. Here's the mistake the food industry, the fitness industry, and frankly much of the medical establishment has made. They've reduced muscle health to a math problem. Count your grams of protein, hit a target, and voila, you've hacked your muscles. It sounds tidy, simple, and marketable. But biology is never that simple. You can't reduce human physiology to a spreadsheet. And when it comes to muscle health, focusing only on protein quantity misses the forest for the trees. Muscle is metabolically expensive tissue. It takes a lot to build it and even more to maintain it over decades. It's not just about piling in protein. It's about giving your body the right tools to keep muscle strong, flexible, and metabolically active. The amino acid profile matters. The timing matters. The cofactors matter. And above all, the metabolic environment matters. If your body is inflamed, insulin resistant, or nutrient deficient, you can eat all the protein you want, it won't end up where you need it. It's like trying to build a house with bricks but no mortar, no scaffolding, and a crumbling foundation. Let's start with amino acids. Protein isn't a monolith. It's made up of building blocks. Some are essential, meaning you must get them from food. Others are non-essential, which your body can make among them. Leucine gets the spotlight because it's a trigger for muscle protein synthesis. But muscle isn't built on leucine alone. It requires a symphony of amino acids, each playing its part. Methionine, lysine, tryptophan, valine, the list goes on. If one is missing, the whole system falters. Whey protein and other isolates often provide plenty of leucine, but they may not deliver the balance that whole foods provide. That balance is what ensures long-term muscle integrity, not just short-term spikes in growth. Now let's talk about nutrient density. A salmon fillet, an egg, or a serving of lentils doesn't just give you protein, it delivers fats, vitamins, minerals, and bioactive compounds that shape how your body uses that protein. Omega-3 fatty acids, for example, enhance muscle cell membranes and improve the muscle's ability to respond to anabolic signals. Vitamin D regulates calcium and muscle contraction. Magnesium participates in over 300 enzymatic reactions, many of which involve energy transfer in muscle tissue. Antioxidants from colorful plant foods help reduce oxidative stress, which accelerates muscle breakdown. If you strip protein from its natural food source, you lose all of these helpers. It's like expecting a car to run with gasoline alone, while ignoring the oil, the spark plugs, and the tires. Another piece of the puzzle is insulin sensitivity. Muscle is the largest site of glucose disposal in the body. When your muscles are healthy, they soak up glucose like a sponge, keeping your blood sugar stable and your metabolism humming. But if you're insulin resistant, that process breaks down. You can eat all the protein shakes you want, but if your insulin signaling is blunted, your body won't efficiently build or maintain muscle. This is why people with metabolic syndrome or type 2 diabetes struggle with sarcopenia at higher rates. Protein doesn't fix insulin resistance, but real food, rich in fiber, phytonutrients, and anti-inflammatory fats can. Then there's the gut. We forget that muscle and gut health are intimately linked. Your gut microbiome influences nutrient absorption, inflammation, and even muscle metabolism. Diets high in processed foods and isolated protein powders starve the microbiome of fiber and diversity, leading to dysbiosis. A compromised gut sends inflammatory signals throughout the body, which accelerate muscle breakdown. In contrast, whole foods rich in prebiotics and polyphenols feed the microbiome, reduce inflammation, and create an environment where muscles can thrive. Again, this isn't about hitting a protein number. It's about creating a system that supports muscle from the inside out. And let's not forget lifestyle synergy. Exercise, sleep, stress, all of these determine whether protein ends up in your muscle or your waistline. Protein shakes are often sold as if they bypass these realities, as if you can drink your way to health while ignoring the rest of your life. But the truth is, without the stimulus of resistance exercise, extra protein is just extra calories. Without adequate sleep, your anabolic hormones plummet. Without stress management, cortisol breaks down muscle tissue faster than protein can rebuild it. Quantity means nothing if the context is wrong. Here's the kicker. Societies that consume fewer total grams of protein often maintain healthier muscle mass into old age than societies that consume more. How is that possible? Because it's not about the sheer volume. It's about how that protein is packaged, how it interacts with other nutrients, and how it supports metabolic health over decades. The Mediterranean diet, for example, is not protein heavy by American standards, but it's packed with nutrient-dense proteins from fish, legumes, nuts, and dairy, plus an abundance of plants and healthy fats. The result? Lower rates of sarcopenia, better metabolic health, and greater longevity. So why does the more protein is better myth persist? Because it's profitable. It's easy to sell numbers. It's harder to sell nuance. A company can slap 30 grams of protein on a label and convince you that you're buying muscle in a bottle. They can't slap balanced amino acid profile plus antioxidants and anti-inflammatory compounds in synergy with lifestyle factors on a steak or a bean stew. It doesn't fit on the packaging. But biology doesn't care about marketing. It operates in complexity, whether or not we acknowledge it. So when you hear that you need more protein, stop and ask more of what and in what context. Are you just chasing a bigger number, or are you giving your body the diverse toolkit it needs to build and protect muscle for life? Because muscle health isn't about dumping protein into the system. It's about creating the conditions where that protein is actually used. And that's something no powder, no matter how many grams per serving, can ever deliver on its own. Let's be honest, when it comes to muscle, most people immediately think about steak, chicken breast, or that tub of whey protein sitting in their pantry. They don't think about the quiet heroes, whole foods that never get the glossy magazine covers or flashy endorsements. Yet, these are the foods that don't just build muscle, they protect it, sustain it, and shield it from the relentless march of aging. They're the foods that fight sarcopenia, not by brute force, but by giving your body the complete package it actually needs. Now, what makes these foods so powerful? It's not just the grams of protein. They're nutrient-dense, bioavailable, and synergistic. That's a fancy way of saying your body can actually use what's in them, and what's in them works together like an orchestra, not a solo act. Let's take eggs, for instance. One of the most vilified foods of the late 20th century thanks to the cholesterol scare. Yet today, we know better. Eggs are one of the most complete protein sources you can eat. They contain all the essential amino acids plus choline, lutein, B vitamins, and even small amounts of vitamin D. Those aren't extras, they're critical cofactors for muscle metabolism and brain health. An egg isn't just protein, it's a biological toolkit. Or consider fatty fish like salmon, sardines, and mackerel. These are muscle's secret weapon. Why? Because they combine high-quality protein with omega-3 fatty acids, particularly EPA and DHA. Omega-3 SADs don't just protect the heart, they directly affect muscle by reducing inflammation and improving the efficiency of protein metabolism. In fact, studies show that older adults who consume more omega-3 SADs build muscle more effectively when they exercise compared to those who don't. That's not just about fueling growth. It's about making every gram of protein count. Fish also delivers vitamin D, selenium, and antioxidants that work in the background to keep muscles firing smoothly. And then there are legumes, beans, lentils, chickpeas. Now, some people dismiss them because they're not complete proteins, but that's missing the point. Legumes, especially when combined with grains, provide a robust amino acid profile. More importantly, they're loaded with fiber, magnesium, potassium, and polyphenols. What do those do? They improve insulin sensitivity, reduce oxidative stress, and lower chronic inflammation, all of which are central drivers of sarcopenia. Legumes don't just feed your muscles, they feed your gut microbiome, which in turn helps regulate the systemic environment where muscle either thrives or withers. Show me a whey shake that can do that. Fermented dairy is another underrated powerhouse. Think Greek yogurt, kefir, or aged cheeses. These foods offer high-quality protein, yes, but they also bring calcium, vitamin K2, and probiotics to the table. Calcium is critical for muscle contraction. Vitamin K2 helps direct calcium to the right places, bones and muscles, instead of into arteries, where it does damage. And probiotics improve gut health, which we already know ties directly to muscle health. Put it all together, and fermented dairy becomes more than a protein source. It becomes a metabolic ally. What all these foods have in common is that they don't act in isolation. They don't give you one thing while robbing you of another. They're integrated packages. When you eat them, you're not just checking the protein box, you're reinforcing your entire system. And that's exactly what sarcopenia prevention demands. Sarcopenia isn't a protein deficiency disease. It's a multifactorial decline, driven by inflammation, mitochondrial dysfunction, hormonal shifts, and nutrient imbalances. Tackling it requires foods that do more than one job. That's why these overlooked foods outperform whey protein every time. Now let's put this in perspective. Walk into a supplement store and you'll see a wall of powders promising muscle growth. Walk into a regular grocery store and the foods I just mentioned are sitting quietly in the aisles, often cheaper, always more complete, and never requiring a blender bottle, but which gets all the attention. The powders. Why? Because they're branded, marketed, and sold as solutions. Nobody makes $1 billion marketing salmon. Nobody puts lentils in a neon jug with a lightning bolt on the label. But your body doesn't care about marketing, it cares about nourishment. And here's the irony. People spend hundreds of dollars on whey protein while ignoring the foods that not only give them protein, but also protect their heart, brain, gut, and metabolism. They're chasing a quick fix while the long-term solution is sitting right in front of them on a dinner plate. That's not just a nutritional mistake, it's a cultural one. We've forgotten that the best muscle foods aren't manufactured. They're grown, raised, or harvested. Another point worth emphasizing is sustainability. Whey protein is an industrial byproduct, often shipped, packaged, and consumed in ways that carry a heavy environmental cost. Whole foods like legumes and eggs can be locally sourced, nutrient-dense, and environmentally lighter. When we talk about health, we can't just talk about personal health. We must also talk about planetary health. If the solution to sarcopenia is one that damages ecosystems, then it's not really a solution. Whole foods give us both personal vitality and ecological responsibility. So what's the takeaway? The real powerhouse foods aren't flashy. They're humble. They're often the same foods your grandmother cooked with. They're the foods that provide not just protein, but the environment in which protein can do its job. They give you the amino acids, the cofactors, the anti-inflammatory agents, and the metabolic regulators all in one package. You don't need to look for the next big supplement trend. You need to rediscover the foods we've sidelined in our obsession with powders. Because here's the truth. You can build muscle on whey protein, but you can protect muscle with salmon, eggs, legumes, and yogurt. One is a short-term strategy. The other is a lifelong insurance policy. And when it comes to sarcopenia, it's not about the next 6 months of gains. It's about whether you can still stand up from a chair when you're 80. That's the difference between living and merely surviving. And no tub of powder can give you that. If you want to scare someone about aging, don't start with wrinkles. Don't start with gray hair. Start with sarcopenia. Why? Because it doesn't just change how you look. It changes whether you can live independently, whether you can walk across the street, whether you can get up after a fall. Sarcopenia is the slow creeping thief that robs you of muscle mass, function, and ultimately dignity. And the worst part? Most people don't even know it's happening until it's already too late. That's why I call it a silent killer. So what is sarcopenia? At its core, it's the age-related loss of muscle mass and strength. By the time you hit 30, your muscles are already past their prime. From that point on, unless you actively fight it, you lose about 1% of your muscle mass every year. That doesn't sound like much until you fast forward 30 years. By the time you're 60, you've lost a third of your muscle. By the time you're 80, you may not have enough left to catch yourself if you stumble. And when an elderly person falls, it's not just a bruise, it's a broken hip, a hospital stay, pneumonia, and sometimes a death sentence. That's sarcopenia's final act. But the tragedy is that sarcopenia isn't just about frailty. Muscle is not vanity tissue. It's survival tissue. It's your largest reservoir for glucose disposal. When you eat a meal, your muscles are the sponge that soaks up excess sugar from your bloodstream. Lose that muscle, and suddenly your sponge is tiny and inefficient. Blood sugar spikes higher. Insulin has to work harder, and before you know it, you're on the road to type 2 diabetes. That's why sarcopenia and metabolic syndrome go hand in hand. The less muscle you have, the harder your pancreas has to fight, until one day it gives up. And it doesn't stop there. Muscle is also a protein bank. When you get sick, when you're injured, when you need to mount an immune response, your body draws on stored protein from muscle to build antibodies and repair tissue. If you don't have that reserve, your body can't fight back effectively. That's why sarcopenia is so deadly in older adults. It doesn't just make them weak, it makes them vulnerable to infection, vulnerable to complications, vulnerable to the kind of cascade that starts with the flu and ends in the ICU. Here's another piece people miss. Muscle isn't just mechanical, it's biochemical. Muscle secretes signaling molecules called myokines that communicate with the brain, liver, fat tissue, and immune system. They reduce inflammation, improve insulin sensitivity, and even enhance cognitive function. The less muscle you have, the fewer myokines you produce. That means more inflammation, more insulin resistance, and more brain fog. In other words, sarcopenia doesn't just weaken your body, it accelerates every disease of aging. Dementia, heart disease, diabetes, they all progress faster when muscle mass is low. Now, you might think, well, that's just part of aging, right? We all lose muscle as we get older. Wrong. Sarcopenia isn't inevitable, it's preventable. Yes, some decline is natural, but the rate, the severity, the consequences, those are within our control. The problem is we don't act early enough. We wait until people are in their 70s and already frail to start worrying about muscle. But sarcopenia begins decades earlier. If you're in your 40s or 50s and you're not actively protecting your muscle, you're already on the slope. The tragedy is that the decline feels invisible until one day it isn't. And here's the kicker. Sarcopenia doesn't kill directly. It kills by domino effect. Weak muscles lead to falls. Falls lead to fractures. Fractures lead to immobility. Immobility leads to infections, clots, and decline. Each step seems small, but the chain reaction is deadly. That's why we call it a silent killer. It doesn't scream at you like a heart attack or a stroke. It whispers quietly over years until your independence is gone. So why don't we hear more about it? Because it doesn't sell. The fitness industry is obsessed with aesthetics, six-pack abs, big biceps. The healthcare system is obsessed with treating acute crises, not preventing chronic decline. Sarcopenia falls through the cracks. It's not sexy, it's not profitable, and it doesn't have a flashy drug to fix it. But if we care about longevity, real longevity, not just living longer, but living better, sarcopenia is ground zero. The good news is, we know what works. Resistance exercise, real food rich in high-quality protein, omega-3s, vitamins, and minerals, adequate sleep, stress management. These aren't revolutionary. They're not complicated. They're just ignored. We've been taught to chase numbers, cholesterol, blood sugar, protein grams, while forgetting the bigger picture. Sarcopenia reminds us that the bigger picture matters. Because what good is lowering your cholesterol if you can't climb a flight of stairs? What good is a normal blood sugar if you can't get out of a chair without help? The fight against sarcopenia isn't about vanity. It's about vitality. It's about whether you'll spend your later years traveling, playing with your grandkids, walking on your own 2 feet, or whether you'll spend them in a wheelchair dependent on others for basic tasks. That's the reality no supplement ad wants to tell you. That's the reality we need to face now, not later. So here's the takeaway. Sarcopenia is the silent killer of aging, but silence doesn't mean inevitability. The earlier you act, the more muscle you preserve, the more independence you protect, the more years of quality life you gain. Don't wait for the day you can't get up from the couch. Don't wait until you've lost what you can't easily rebuild. Start now with real food, real movement, and real choices. Because in the end, it's not the wrinkles that define how you age. It's your muscle, and whether it carries you forward or leaves you behind is entirely up to you. Let's cut through the noise. You've heard the hype about whey protein. You've seen the commercials with shredded athletes flexing under perfect lighting, as if the scoop in their blender bottle is the secret to their physique. You've been told that powders, pills, and supplements are the modern way to protect your health. But here's the truth. No powder is going to save you from sarcopenia. No shake is going to guarantee longevity. The real takeaway is simpler, humbler, and far less profitable. Real nutrient-dense whole foods are what build muscles, sustain metabolism, and guard you against the decline of aging. Now, I know that sounds almost too simple. We live in a world that glorifies the shortcut, the hack, the one weird trick. People want an edge, something quick, something convenient. And yes, whey protein delivers convenience, but what it doesn't deliver is long-term protection. Muscle health, metabolic resilience, and longevity don't come from convenience. They come from consistency. Consistency in diet, consistency in lifestyle, consistency in choices that nourish rather than deplete. That's why powders fall short. They're tools, not foundations. And if you build your health on tools instead of foundations, don't be surprised when the structure collapses. Here's the thing about whole foods. They're complex. They don't just contain protein. They contain the cofactors that make protein usable. They don't just build muscle. They protect the systems that keep muscle alive. Take salmon. It's not just protein. It's omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, selenium, antioxidants. Each one plays a role in muscle health and beyond. Or take beans. Protein, yes, but also fiber, magnesium, and phytonutrients that fight inflammation and improve insulin sensitivity. Whey protein isolates strip all that away. They give you one note when your body needs the whole symphony. And let's be clear, sarcopenia isn't just about muscle. It's about everything muscle influences: blood sugar control, immune function, inflammation, balance, independence. Fighting sarcopenia means fighting for your ability to live life on your terms. And that requires more than protein grams. It requires an environment where protein can actually do its job. Whole foods provide that environment. They nourish the microbiome, regulate hormones, lower oxidative stress, and improve nutrient utilization. A shake can't do that. But the deeper issue here is cultural. We've been conditioned to think health comes from products, not practices. We've handed over our trust to industries that thrive on keeping us dependent on powders, dependent on pills, dependent on processed solutions. That mindset is the real danger, because as long as we keep looking for salvation in a scoop, we ignore the obvious truth sitting right in front of us. The foods that grow from the ground, swim in the ocean, or come from the farm are still the best medicine we have. Let me give you a practical example. Imagine two people. One eats a diet rich in fish, eggs, beans, leafy greens, nuts, and fermented dairy. The other relies on fast food and fills the gap with 2 whey shakes a day. On paper, they might both hit the same protein target. But in reality,